I found out my parents have been lying to me about a family member for the past 20 years. Guys, today we have 2 stories to look at, jam-packed with updates and every comment that was relevant. Let's jump into it. I found out my parents have been lying to me about a family member for 20 years. I'm 25 female. I've always been told I was an only child. My parents, 58 male, 55 female, have always doted on me, supported me in every dream, and given me the kind of childhood that most kids would envy. We were upper middle class, lived in a nice neighborhood, and I never wanted for anything. They pushed me to excel, and I did. Graduated top of my class, getting into the excellent university, and landing a great job right out of college. Last month, I was helping my mother clean out the attic before they downsized to a smaller home. Now that I'm on my own, while sorting through boxes of old photos and mementos, I found a small wooden box tucked behind some holiday decorations. Inside was a collection of photos of a young boy who looked to be about 4 years older than me. The resemblance to my father was striking. At first, I thought maybe it was a cousin I'd never met or some distant relative. But then I found a birth certificate with my parents' name listed as mother and father. The boy's name was Ethan. His birth date was exactly 4 years before mine. My heart was pounding as I bought the box downstairs. My mother took one look at what I was holding and went pale as a ghost. She immediately called my father, who rushed home from work. They sat me down and told me the story that they've been hiding for 20 years. Ethan was their firstborn son. When he was 7 years old, he developed a rare form of leukemia. They spent 2 years fighting it, draining their savings, mortgaging their home, and even moving across the country for experimental treatment. Nothing worked. Ethan passed away just before his 9th birthday, almost a year before I was born. The grief nearly destroyed my parents. They could not bear to talk about him, couldn't handle the sympathy from neighbors and friends, so when we moved to our current home, when I was 2, they made a decision. They would never speak of Ethan again. They packed away all his photos, donated his belongings, and just pretended that he never existed. I was devastated, not just because I had a brother I never knew about, but because my entire childhood suddenly felt like it was built on a lie. All those times my mom would stare off into space on random days in April. His birthday, I now know. The way my father could not handle visiting children's hospitals for charity events. The strange gap in my family story. I asked them if anybody else knew. Apparently, my grandparents and a few close family friends knew the truth but had agreed to never mention Ethan to me. My parents begged me to understand. They thought they were protecting both me and themselves from the pain. I've been staying with a friend for the past 2 weeks, and I can't look at my parents without feeling betrayed. They didn't just hide family members from me, they erased them. I never got to know about my brother. Never got to visit his grave, never got to understand this huge part of my family history. Part of me understands their grief was overwhelming, but another part is furious that they made this decision for me. I feel like I've lost both the brother I never knew and the parents I thought I knew completely. I don't know how to move forward from here. How do you forgive someone like this? I mean, how do you rebuild trust? I have an appointment with a therapist next week, but I'm not sure what I'm even supposed to say. My parents erased my brother, who's gone, from existence and lied to me my entire life. Has anyone dealt with something similar? How do you process finding out your entire family history was a fabrication? That was the first update. There is another update that we're going to look at. It came out 3 months after the original post. However, the original poster did reply to a couple comments in the first one, and a lot of people are saying, yes, this is very heartbreaking, but what OP doesn't understand is that his parents were grieving. They didn't know how to handle the situation well, and they were just trying to hold it together, and they did what was, in their heads, the best decision to make, to spare a little bit of grief, but other commenters are saying no, it's not fair to OP. Let's check out the first commenter from Broken Compass 4217. This is heartbreaking from every angle. Your parents made a terrible choice in their overwhelming grief, but they didn't do it to hurt you. They did it because they could not face their pain. Grief makes people do irrational things. Give yourself time to process this, but please consider that they've been carrying this weight for 20 years. Your brother deserves to be remembered, and all of you deserve a chance to heal together. OP replies to that and says, I want to forgive them. I really do. But every time I think about all the chances they had to tell me when I was a teenager, when I became an adult, it makes me furious all over again that they robbed me of knowing my brother. Even in memory, I'm trying to understand, but it's hard. It's so hard. And the final comment comes from Sunset Survivor 76 before we hop into the updates. My parents did something similar with my twin who passed away at birth. I found out when I was 30 from a drunken uncle at a wedding. The anger will fade eventually. What helped me was creating space for my siblings in my life now. I got the memorial tattoo, began celebrating their birthday, and asked for every story and photo my extended family had. You can't change the past, but you can make sure your brother is honored going forward. Update number 1, 3 months have passed. It's been 3 months since I discovered the truth about my brother Ethan. I wanted to update you because your comments really helped me gain perspective. After about a month of limited contact with my parents, I finally agreed to meet them at my therapist's office. The session was brutal but necessary. My mother brought a photo album that she's kept hidden in a safe deposit box. The only pictures of Ethan that she could not bear to box up in the attic. Seeing those photos, hearing the stories about him, it was like meeting a ghost. My therapist suggested something that changed everything. She asked my parents if they would take me to Ethan's grave. They have not visited in over 15 years. And my mom broke down at the suggestion. But a week later, we made the journey to a small cemetery 3 hours from our home, in the town where we used to live. The headstone was simple. Ethan Miller, 1995 to 04. Forever loved. There was no fresh flowers, no signs of anyone visiting in years. We stood there in silence for what felt like hours before my dad starts telling stories. How Ethan loved dinosaurs and wanted to be a paleontologist. How he collected rocks from everywhere we would visit. How he taught himself to read when he was just 4 years old. That day broke the dam. Since then, my parents have gradually shared more and more about Ethan. I've learned he was stubborn, like me, that he hated peas, which I also can't stand, and that he had the same crooked smile I see in my own photos. I've connected with my brother through these stories in a way I never thought possible. The most surprising revelation came last week. My parents finally explained why they decided to have another child after losing Ethan. They admitted that initially they hoped having me would help them heal, but then they were terrified of losing another kid, which is why they became so protective of me growing up. What they never told me was that they used to go to the same fertility clinic for both pregnancies. The clinic had kept Ethan's genetic material on file, and my parents made the decision to use the same donor for me. Biologically, Ethan and I are full siblings, which explains the strong resemblance I noticed in the photos. This knowledge has been both comforting and very unsettling. It does explain so many things. Why distant relatives sometimes looked at me strange. Why my parents seemed haunted when I reached that age. Ethan was when he got sick. Why they were so overprotective about my health. I'm still working through my feelings, but I've moved from anger to something more complex. I understand their grief better now, though I still believe they made the wrong choice in hiding Ethan from me. We've started a new tradition of visiting his grave together on his birthday, and I've put some of his photos up in my apartment. My therapist says grief doesn't have an expiration date and healing is not linear. I'm learning that firsthand. Some days I feel close to forgiveness and others I still feel angry. But we're talking now, really talking, and that's something. To those who offered advice and shared similar stories, thank you. You helped me understand that while my situation felt uniquely painful, others have walked this path before and there's comfort in that somehow. Update comments. The first comment comes from Nightlight Rider. It says, this update made me cry. The journey you're on is incredibly difficult, but also beautiful in its way. You're not just healing your relationship with your parents, you're bringing Ethan back into the family narrative where he belongs. I think that's the greatest gift you could give to all of you. Comment 2 comes from Truthseeker555. The fertility clinic revelation is mind-blowing. I can see why that would bring up complex feelings. In a way, you're carrying a piece of Ethan Ford into this world, and I'm glad you're in therapy and working through this gradually, sending strength as you continue this journey. And this is where OP replies and says, "Thank you both. Sometimes it feels like I'm grieving someone I never knew, while also mourning the relationship I thought I had with my parents. But every story I learn about Ethan makes me feel more real to me. Yesterday, I found out we had the same favorite book as a kid, The Phantom Tool Booth. It was like discovering a piece of myself I never even knew was missing. I hired a private investigator just to follow my husband and discover something unexpected. My husband and I have been married for 12 years. We're having 2 children, 10 female and 8 male. A beautiful home in the burbs, and what I always thought was a solid marriage. David works in finance, and I run small graphic design from home, which gives me flexibility with the kids. About 6 months ago, I started noticing changes in David's behavior. He began working late more often, was constantly checking his phone, and seemed emotionally distant. The classic signs of an affair, right? He starts taking calls in the other room. Changed his phone password and was vague about his whereabouts. When I asked about his day, he would give me short, dismissive answers. The final straw came when I found a receipt. Expensive restaurants in his jacket. On the night, he told me he was working late. When I confronted him, he gets defensive and said it was a business dinner that he forgot about. But his reaction seemed off, almost rehearsed. After weeks of anxiety and sleepless nights, I did something I never thought I would do. I hired a private investigator. Mike was recommended by a friend who used him during our divorce. I felt sick about it, but I needed to know the truth. Was my husband cheating? Was our marriage over? For 2 weeks, Mike tracked David's movements, took photos reported back to me, and instead of catching David with another woman, as I'd feared, Mike discovered something else entirely. David was meeting regularly with a woman in her 60s at various locations, restaurants, parks, even at an apartment building across town. When Mike showed me the photos, my stomach dropped. The woman was not a lover, it was David's mother. The thing is, David's mother died when he was in college. At least that's what he told me when we met. According to David, his mother had passed away from breast cancer. His father died in a car accident when he was a kid. He described himself as an orphan with no siblings and virtually no extended family, which was why he always spent holidays with my relatives. I confronted David that night, showing him the photos and demanding an explanation. The story that came out left me speechless. David's parents had not died. His father was indeed gone, but had left when David was young, not dead. His mother, however, was very much alive. The reason for the deception? His mother is a convicted felon who served 15 years in prison for embezzlement from the company where she worked as a financial controller. She was released about 7 months ago. David explained that when we met in our mid-20s, he was so ashamed of his mother's crime and incarceration that he found it easier that she said that, well, she had died. The lie continued, grew, and eventually became impossible to untangle. When his mother was released from prison, he could not bear to tell me the truth after lying for so long, so he began meeting her in secrecy. I was stunned, not just by the lie, but the elaborate fiction he maintained for over a decade. He'd create fake stories about his childhood, show me altered photos, even made up details about his mother's cancer battle, and how it affected him. He'd maintain this fiction with my family, our friends, even our children. The betrayal I felt is not about another woman. It's about the foundation of trust in our marriage, and I thought I knew everything about the man I married. But now I question every story he's ever told me. Did he think that I was so shallow that I would judge him for his mother's crime? Did he believe I would not accept his real background? David has been sleeping in the guest room for the past week. He's begging for forgiveness, saying he was young and stupid when the lie began, and then could not find a way out. He wants to introduce me and the kids to his mother to start fresh with the truth, but I'm struggling to move past this. It's not just a white lie or an omission, it's an entire fabricated personal history. And part of me understands the shame and fear that might drive someone to hide this kind of family drama, but another part just wonders what else he might be lying about and whether I can ever trust him again. Has anyone dealt with the discovering their spouse has been living a double life? Not cheating, but lying about something fundamental. How do you rebuild trust after something like this? That was the first main post. We're going to check out a few comments on this story before we hop into the update, but first, let's discuss this. It must be pretty relieving, I can say, to OP to find out that her significant other is not a cheater. However, she did find something pretty disturbing. He is a liar. He's been lying to her for so long about his mom, and it just begs the question, why? And do I move past this and let my children meet his mom? Well, let's check out some comments. The first one comes from Therapist in Training. This is such a complex situation because his lie was not malicious in the traditional sense. It came from shame and fear, not a desire to hurt you. That doesn't excuse it, but understanding the motivation matters. Before making any permanent decision, consider couples counseling. This is exactly what kind of situation where having a neutral third party can help navigate and rebuild the trust, if that's what you want. Well, OP actually replied here and said, "We had our first couples therapy session yesterday. It was brutal but necessary, and the therapist pointed out that while David's lie was massive, it wasn't about rejecting me or our marriage, it was about rejecting a part of himself that he was ashamed of. That gave me something to think about. Still not sure where we go from here, though." And the final comment before we hop into the update is from Realist Dreamer 42. "My husband hid that he had been previously married because his ex-wife cheated on him with his best friend, and he was too embarrassed to tell me. Found out 5 years into the marriage when his ex contacted me via Facebook. I was furious, but we worked through it. The key for us was complete transparency going forward. I had access to everything. He answered every question honestly, no matter how uncomfortable, and he did the emotional work to understand why he made the choice. I'd say it took about 2 years before I fully trusted him again, but we recently celebrated our 12th anniversary. Healing is possible if both people are committed to do the work." Alright guys, let's hop into the first update without any further ado. It's been 4 long months. Update number 1. It's been 4 months since I discovered my husband's mother was alive. I wanted to update you on where things are. After intensive couples therapy and many difficult conversations, David and I are cautiously rebuilding our marriage. The road has not been easy, and I still have moments of doubt, but we're making it. 2 months ago, I finally agreed to meet his mother, Patricia. I was prepared to dislike her, to see her as the source of our problems, and instead, I met a soft-spoken woman who broke down in tears when she saw me. She apologized repeatedly for the position that her past had put her son in, saying that she had never wanted him to deny her existence but understood why he felt he had to. Over lunch, Patricia shared her story. She's been a single mother struggling to provide for David after his father abandoned them. When David was 12, she began siphoning money from her company to pay for a better apartment in a safer neighborhood and a private school that would give David more opportunities. What started as borrowing quickly spiraled into full-blown embezzlement that continued for years before she was caught. The most surprising part was learning that David had visited her every month during her incarceration, never missing once in 15 years. He'd kept this secret not just from me, but from everyone in his life. While building his career in finance, he feared that having a mother convicted of financial crimes would destroy his professional reputation. Meeting Patricia helped me understand, but the real breakthrough came unexpectedly through our children. After several more meetings with Patricia, we decided it's time to tell our kids the truth. Obviously, an age-appropriate version. We explained that Daddy had made a mistake by saying Grandma passed away when she was actually away for a long time, but now she's back and wants to meet them. Our daughter innocently asked, "Is Grandma like Aladdin? He had to steal bread because he was poor, but he was still good." That simple question broke something open in all of us. David began to cry, really cry. For what felt like the first time since all this even began, he admitted that he had been carrying this shame his entire adult life. And hearing our daughter instinctively try to understand rather than judge was overwhelming. We've since had Patricia over to our house several times. She's wonderful with the children, and I can see pieces of her in David that I never recognized before. Her laugh, the way she tilts her head when thinking, even certain phrases I'd always thought were unique to him. The hardest part was telling my parents and siblings. They were shocked and hurt, particularly my father, who had shared his own grief after losing his parents with David over the years. But after the initial reaction, they've been surprisingly supportive. Particularly my mom, who has made efforts to welcome Patricia into family gatherings. As for our marriage, we're still healing. David's given me complete access to his phone, email, and schedule, not because I demanded it, but as a gesture of transparency. We continue with therapy, both couples and individual, and I'm working through my trust issues, and he's confronting the shame that drove him to create such an elaborate deception. The most valuable lesson has been realizing that people are shaped by their experience in ways that are always visible or logical. Well, David's lies came from a place of deep shame and fear, not malice. Understanding that has not erased the hurt, but it's made forgiveness possible. We still have difficult days. Just last week, I found an old photo album and realized all the stories behind certain pictures were fabrications. It triggered all the old feelings of betrayal, but instead of shutting down, I called David at work and told him how I felt. He came home early and we talked through it together. I don't know if our marriage will ultimately survive this, but I'm cautiously optimistic. If nothing else, this experience has taught me that people are complicated, that love can coexist with deep hurt, and that sometimes the hardest truth to tell are the ones we've been hiding from ourselves. Updated comments. First comment comes from Wisdom Keeper 33. What strikes me the most about your update is the compassion you've shown, not just to your husband, but to his mother as well. Many people would have walked away, and that would be understandable too. But you chose the harder path of understanding. Whatever happens with your marriage, you've given your children a powerful example of empathy and forgiveness. Comment 2. Peaceful Warrior 22. Oh, the Aladdin moment with your daughter moved me to tears. Kids have such a way of cutting through complications to the heart of things. I'm glad Patricia is getting to know her grandbabies, and that you're all finding a way forward. Wishing your family healing and peace as you continue this journey. And the final comment comes from OP, replying to the two saying thank you both. Yesterday, Patricia brought over old baby photos of David that I've never seen before. Watching him share stories about his childhood with our kids' real stories this time was both heartbreaking and beautiful. There's something powerful about finally being able to claim your whole history. Even as the painful parts, we still have a long way to go, but moments like that give me hope.